Welcome to Fun Facts Online. Today, we are diving into a discovery that recently shook the foundations of biology. A finding so strange it sounds less like science and more like the plot of a horror movie or a science fiction novel. Imagine, if you will, that you have sustained a serious injury. In the human world, your body would rush to isolate the wound, triggering an immune response to distinguish your cells from anything foreign. But now, imagine if you could press your wound against another injured person, and instead of rejecting each other, your bodies simply merged. Your skin would fuse. Your nervous systems would wire together. You would share a stomach. You would become, for all intents and purposes, a single, functioning individual. This is not a thought experiment. This is a reality for the ctenophore Mnemiopsis ladii, also known as the warty comb jelly. Today we are going to explore this phenomenon, known as syncytial survival, tracing it from a serendipitous lab accident to its profound implications for evolution, the immune system, and our philosophical understanding of the self. To understand this story, we have to start in the sterile hum of a marine biology laboratory at the University of Exeter and the National Institutes of Natural Sciences in Japan. Science is often portrayed as a series of calculated steps, but history shows us that the biggest leaps often come from mistakes or accidents. This was exactly the case for researcher Keiji Okura. He was conducting routine maintenance on a population of warty comb jellies kept in seawater tanks. These creatures are translucent, walnut-sized animals that usually drift alone. But on this particular day, Okura noticed something wrong. Among the solitary jellies, there was one individual that was unusually large and misshapen. It possessed anatomical redundancies that simply should not exist, specifically 2 rear ends and 2 distinct sensory organs. In most biological contexts, you would look at this and assume it was a developmental mutant, or perhaps 2 animals tangled together in a death grip. But this jelly was alive. It was swimming, and it seemed to be thriving. When the team inspected it closer, they realized there was no separation between the lobes. They were not just stuck together, they were continuous. This observation triggered a memory of a scientific ghost from 1937. Nearly a century ago, a biologist named B.R. Kuhnfield reported seeing fusion in comb jellies. However, in the 1930s, we lacked the genetic and imaging tools to prove what was happening, and Kuhnfield's paper became a dusty footnote, largely forgotten as biology moved toward the age of genetics. Okura's rediscovery revived this dormant mystery. Was this a freak accident or a reproducible biological strategy? To find out, the team moved from observation to experimentation. They took separate individuals, surgically removed small portions of their lobes to simulate injury, and placed them in close contact. The results were staggering. In 9 out of 10 cases, the jellies did not just heal, they merged. Within a single night, the boundary between the 2 animals vanished. They had become one. Now, to truly appreciate how alien this is, we need to understand the animal itself. Mnemiopsis ladii is often mistaken for a jellyfish, but it belongs to an entirely separate phylum called Ctenophora. The name comes from the Greek for comb-bearer, referring to the 8 rows of giant fused cilia that run along their bodies. These combs beat in waves to propel the animal, diffracting light and creating a shimmering rainbow effect often mistaken for bioluminescence. These animals are voracious predators, acting like biological vacuum cleaners. In fact, they are so resilient that they are considered a major invasive species. In the 1980s, they were accidentally introduced into the Black Sea via ship ballast water. With no natural predators, their population exploded to the point where their biomass was estimated to be greater than the entire global catch of fish, crashing the local anchovy fisheries. This ecological resilience hints at a physiology that is incredibly plastic and robust, and the ability to fuse bodies seems to be another tool in their arsenal. But the most shocking part of this fusion is not just that they stick together, but how they integrate. When the researchers placed 2 injured jellies together, they witnessed a masterclass in biological integration. Step 1 is the glue. When the jelly-like middle layer, called the mesoglia, is exposed, it becomes sticky. Instead of forming scar tissue to seal off the world, the cells reach out. But step 2 is where it gets truly sci-fi. It is the nervous handshake. In the experiments, mechanical stimulation of one side of the fused chimera resulted in a synchronized muscle contraction on the other side within just 2 hours. For this to happen, the neurons of the first animal had to physically connect with the neurons of the second animal. In most animals, including humans, severed nerves take weeks or months to regenerate, if they do at all. In the comb jelly, the connection was functional almost immediately. This finding lends massive support to a controversial idea known as the syncytial nerve net hypothesis. Unlike us, ctenophores do not have a centralized brain. They have a nerve net spread beneath their skin. For decades, we assumed this net was made of separate cells, using chemical synapses to talk to each other. But recent high-resolution microscopy suggests that parts of their nerve net are syncytial. A syncytium in biology is a multinucleated mass of cytoplasm that is not separated into individual cells by membranes. Basically, it is a giant shared room, rather than a series of private apartments. If their nervous system is indeed a continuous web, linking two webs together might be as simple as fusing 2 drops of water. The integration did not stop at the nerves. It extended to the digestive system. The researchers fed one side of the fused animal with fluorescently labeled brine shrimp. Under UV light, they watched the glowing food travel down the throat of the first animal, enter its digestive canals, and then remarkably cross the midline into the digestive canals of the second animal. They had merged their guts into a single, shared metabolic system. Interestingly, they kept their own bathroom schedules, expelling waste from their respective separate anuses at different times, suggesting that while nutrient transport was fused, some autonomic control remained localized. This brings us to the biggest question of all. Why does their immune system allow this? In almost all multicellular life, there is a strict biological bouncer known as the immune system. Its main job is allorecognition, distinguishing self from non-self. If you try to graft skin from one human to another, the recipient's body violently rejects it. Even simple animals like sponges and corals do this, engaging in fierce chemical warfare to protect their space. The warty comb jelly seems to lack this bouncer entirely. The fusion experiments suggest they do not possess the genes to distinguish their own tissues from another member of their species. There are a few theories why. First is simplicity. Evolution is a cost-benefit analysis. Developing complex receptors to distinguish self from non-self is energetically expensive. Second is regenerative potential. Animals that can regrow limbs often have cells that remain in a plastic stem-like state. Rigid immune barriers might interfere with this. The third theory is the oceanic drift theory. In the vast, three-dimensional void of the open ocean, the likelihood of 2 comb jellies bumping into each other and fusing by accident is incredibly low. Unlike corals competing for rock space, jellies float freely. There was likely no evolutionary pressure to develop a rejection mechanism because, in nature, fusion almost never happened until humans put them in tanks. This discovery also vindicates a long-lost scientific theory. In the late 19th century, neuroscientists Camillo Golgi and Santiago Ramón y Cajal debated the structure of the nervous system. Golgi argued for the reticular theory, stating the nervous system was a continuous fused mesh. Cajal argued for the neuron doctrine, stating neurons were discrete cells. Cajal won, and the neuron doctrine became dogma, but the ctenophore nerve net suggests Golgi was not entirely wrong. He was just looking at the wrong animal. If ctenophore neurons are naturally fused, it explains the rapid healing. The wires do not need to regrow complex terminals. They just fuse membranes, allowing electrical ions to flow freely. This has massive evolutionary implications. Ctenophores are currently at the center of a debate called the ctenophore sister hypothesis. Genomic analysis suggests they branched off from the animal family tree before sponges. This implies that either the common ancestor of all animals was complex and sponges lost their nerves, or that ctenophores evolved their nervous systems completely independently from the rest of us. The fusion ability supports the idea of convergent evolution. They are effectively aliens that evolved on Earth, solving the problem of multicellularity with a completely different toolkit. Finally, we must touch on the philosophical and practical horizons. This discovery challenges our definition of an individual. In humans, individuality is defined by isolated brains and immune systems. In Nemiopsis, individuality is a temporary state. They are fluid entities, capable of acting as one. While we cannot fuse humans, understanding the molecular mechanisms here could offer clues for regenerative medicine. If we can isolate the proteins that allow their nerves to fuse so quickly, it could revolutionize how we treat spinal cord injuries. Or, understanding their lack of allorecognition could reveal new pathways for organ transplants, helping us trick the human body into accepting a donor heart as self. The syncytial survival of the comb jelly is more than a biological oddity. It is a window into the deep past and the potential future of life. It reminds us that the rules we take for granted, like discrete bodies and the rejection of the foreign, are not universal laws. In the drifting lineage of the comb jelly, boundaries are just suggestions. Thank you for listening to this deep dive into the fluid nature of life on Fun Facts Online.